Welcome back to Don't Pick the Scab podcast, everyone. Today we have a truly unique guest who brings a wealth of experience and perspective to the topic of navigating life transitions. Tim Tamashiro is a best-selling author, keynote speaker, and part-time monk. That's going to be interesting. A fascinating combination, to say the least. As the host of the Sufferless with a Part-Time Monk podcast and author of How to Ikigai, Tim helps people find purpose, reduce suffering, and live with more ease. He blends ancient wisdom, neuroscience, and storytelling to offer practical tools for finding calm and meaning in a chaotic world. Something many of us over 40 are desperately seeking, especially after divorce. Let's welcome Tim to the show and tell us a little about yourself. And I got some questions for you, Tim. Welcome to the Don't Pick the Scab podcast with the premise of connecting men over 40 with the tools and community to thrive in their divorce recovery either before, during, or after a divorce.
Thank you very much. I've never thought that I would be on a podcast called Don't Pick the Scab. And I'm so overjoyed to be here. But it's such a wise title, Don't pick the scab, it'll never heal, So anyway, thank you very much, David. So I'm coming to you from Calgary, Canada, and my puppy dog is laying on his mat right next to it, and it's his birthday today. So he got some ham for his birthday. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I've always lived my Ikigai, what I love to do and what I'm good at. What the world needs and what I can be rewarded for. And it started back when I was just 20 years old. I figured out, you know what? I got to have fun in life, and I want to do the things that I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. And if there's a way to make a living from that, then that would be great. And so I've been very lucky to be able to not only make a living doing all these things. I was a jazz singer. I was a major label record rep. I was a radio host, a singer, all these different things throughout my life. And I can say that it's been the most fascinating life, and it's only getting started. I'm only 60. So
there you go.
But like, you've pointed out, life comes in spurts, some of it is really easy and some of it is really hard. And one of the toughest parts for me was to go through divorce fairly recently within the last couple of years, but it has actually turned out to be a very joyful thing for me.
Wow. What a concept. Mm-hmm. Our men out there. That is awesome. So you help people answer the questions, what's my purpose and how can I suffer less? How do these questions become amplified or changed after a major life event like divorce at this stage of life?
Well, those are only two of the most important questions that people tend to need to answer during their lifetime. What's my purpose, obviously? Mm-hmm. How can I suffer less and find more ease? But the first one is, how can I find love, or will I find love? So we put a lot of effort into the love part of it, especially. And I'm quite fascinated by the fact that we put all this effort into love, but it's a reptilian brain that is driving a lot of this. It's the what I call the default brain at the top of your spinal column that is kind of running the show. This is for procreation. This is for making sure that you make babies and your name lives on, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But along with that, we also find very special people that we get to spend time with. I feel very lucky to have had the marriage that I had, because we had a real excellent and beautiful love affair, and we got married, and we were very passionate and loving and all the good stuff that a person would expect in a marriage, including raising children and learning from each other, therapy, trials, tribulations, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end of year 28, it kind of got to the point for me where I thought, you know what, this is, she said to me, I think it's time for us to separate. And my question to her, or actually the thought that popped into my mind immediately was, you're suffering. And so am I. So if we're suffering, it's necessary for us to do something. And this affords me and her, hopefully, the opportunity to be able to love each other in a new way. We get the opportunity to be able to grow beyond this living together portion of life and move towards more of a contentment age where we can kind of go, well, you know what? You're still family and I respect you and I still love you, but just in a new way. We don't have to remain connected. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it went off in a bit of a spiel there, didn't I?
Yeah, that's fine. And also, many men define themselves by their roles as husbands and fathers. How can they use the concept of Ikigai to redefine their reason for being after divorce?
Well, this Ikigai is this foundation of being able to really utilize your curiosity in life to go out there and to try to do all the things that you want to in your lifetime. You know, as we were kids, we went through all these different phases of childhood, like, you know, being a toddler and, you know, going out there and experimenting and trying stuff out and going through hormones and yada, yada, yada. And then at the end of high school, then the grown-ups started asking this question. So now what are you going to do? And that is a huge amount of pressure for any 17 or 18-year-old to face. And we're all kind of forced into this feeling of, okay, now we have to start adulting. So curiosity and wonder kind of flies out the window, you know? And for men, I can say it's a much different experience than it is for women, because men now have identities that we have to live up to as according to, you know, social norms and mores and all that other kind of stuff. And we're expected to go out there and to be still breadwinners and you know, the protector and all those other types of things. So as we get in deeper into life, I would say especially 35 to around 50, 52, 54, we're in what's known as the warrior stage of life. And what I mean by that is this is the stage of life where we've identified something that we could be really, really good at, and we could be excellent at making a bunch of money. And we are very interested as well at proving it, I guess,
Okay.
to not only yourself, but to the world as well. So Ikigai or purpose doesn't play any role in that whatsoever. So this is really challenging. When we come out of a relationship, now we have to rediscover ourselves in all sorts of different ways, not only with our relationship with ourselves, but our relationship with other partners. And we also have the opportunity to be able to find ourselves in terms of what our purpose can be and what that might be able to bring to the picture for not only our life and our career, but also for our future relationships.
Wow. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. So you talk about trading burnout for balance. A
Mm.
divorce can be incredibly stressful. What are some practical steps men can take to find balance and purpose during this time?
Well, we know you can't rush it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. And this is one of the most challenging parts of this type of suffering coming out of a relationship is that, you know, you might feel like, oh, I have to start dating right away and I have to get out there and start sowing my oats again. Yeah.
Don't do
Right.
it.
Uh, Number one, that can be fun and that can be expensive, but it's
Yeah.
also self-medicating in a way, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to cover up the hurt that you've gone through
It's
with
almost like a
your.
drug.
It
Yeah.
is like a drug, yeah, yeah. It's a way to not deal with what is right in front of your face. Now, there's an interesting thing that I like to talk about in just the way that I with my podcast and with the way that I talk with people. We have three ways that we can live our life. We can live our life by default, which is the way that most people do it. This is just like just kind of going through life bit by bit and being unaware of the type of suffering that we're going through. But if we step into deliberation, now we're opening ourselves up to awareness. Now we are at a point where we can start using our mind to look at our mind. And this is a really eye-opening way to be able to start to face life. And this is really, really helpful, especially a post-relationship or going into and through and out of divorce, is to really start looking at yourself and to notice the type of suffering that you're going through. It may be financial, it may be emotional, it may be triggered by past traumatic events like,
Mhm.
parenthood and all that other, how your parents raised you, all sorts of different things. But the more aware you become of these things, look at them and release them, Then you're able to step into the third stage, which is design. Now you can start utilizing your life and living by design and choosing the things that you want to suffer from more effectively. And it's really quite liberating to be able to get that feeling of balance and grace when you're dealing with stress and anxiety and the weight of the world on top
No
of
kidding.
your divorce, right?
Yes. So you bring heart, humor, and a fresh perspective. How important is humor? That's one of my favorite things in navigating the difficult emotions like grief and anger after divorce. Humor can be a great medicine for healing.
Well, let me flip that around and ask you how you used humor to be able to deal with it. I'm curious.
You know, mine was more from the standpoint because my divorce was contentious, and it's like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Oh my God. And sometimes I would laugh at it because it was so some of the demands were so out of touch that I had to laugh just to keep from crying. And that kind of kept me centered from the standpoint of not going, I wouldn't say losing my mind, but just getting just craziness. Why is she asking for this when she knows this is not going to happen? And I would just have to laugh. It was like a comedy, basically. Yeah.
It was like do you think it was like a valve release? You're starting to kind of get to the point
Yeah.
where you're just it's too much and you're just kind of releasing the valve a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
right?
And then I felt better. Yeah. I will laugh at some of the dumbest things. And because a lot of the things were dumb to me. And that's kind of how I got through it after I was able to table my anger. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? It makes you feel liberated to be able to. Well, you got to go through it.
But yeah. You got to feel the
For one
feels.
thing,
Yep.
feel all the feels, right?
Oh yeah. The
and
feels.
and they're going to be there. And the interesting thing is, if you don't feel the feels, then they're stored someplace, and they're going to come out in another way that you might not really enjoy, and maybe even future partners might not enjoy as well. Laughter is one of those things. I tended to look at using the humor that I saw in the way that we dealt with things. I would laugh at, for example, I'd laugh at my ex was notoriously late for everything, right? And that a lot of it has to do with just the way that she sees the world, and she's a bit time blind, and there may be some ADHD in that, et cetera, et cetera. But I look at it now and I went, now that's not my problem. Now her boyfriend deals with that, and I know that he suffers because of it. And it's not that I'm laughing at him, but I kind of had a little giggle with my kids about it, and I go, "Hey, Steve's doing all the waiting now, or whatever whatever the case." But laughter with your friends, laughter with just looking at your situation and realizing that, number one, this is temporary, and
Right.
you're going to get through this situation sooner or later, but take time to just enjoy laughter and contentment with the people that you really want to spend time with, your kids, your friends, maybe make some new friends. And when you do start dating, then maybe laughter is going to shift a little bit for you.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Speak to my guys. Like I think we talked about in the pre-interview last week or this week. We were talking about my guys who have a hard time not being able to control what happens at the ex's house. That is huge with my men. That control factor. What are some of the ways they can probably let that go because they can't control it, and it just consumes them sometime. I was there for a short time till I figured out that, hey, this is a waste of time. I cannot control what happens there, even though I wanted to. Speak to those guys for me.
There's a parable that is used in Buddhism called the parable of the second arrow. One of Buddha's students, I guess you could say, followers, walked up to him one time and they said, how come I keep on suffering from all this stuff that has gone on in my past, and why can't I control my situations all the time? And the Buddha said, the first arrow that hits you that is going to cause you suffering, that is inevitable. Okay. So in other words, you're going to suffer from something like going to your ex's house and not being in control whatsoever, and probably feeling really, really exasperated. He said, but the second arrow you have control over. So there's the second arrow is every time you go and suffer from the exact same thing over and over and over again. He says, don't get hit by the second arrow. Just know that the second arrow is coming and just avoid it like the plague. Don't subject yourself to those situations over and over again, or it's just going to keep on hurting in the exact same spot. You're getting stabbed in the exact same spot every time that you go through the exact same thing. So notice it. Notice that it's happening. Promise yourself compassionately that you can let that go and don't need to be in control, or just go there with compassion and just be agreeable. And I'm sure your life could really be changed out of that. And I guarantee you, there's a lot of listeners out there right now that are saying, Tim, you are full of it. And that's okay too. That's okay too. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but what I can say from my own point of view is that when I released it and I didn't get hit by the second arrow anymore, then that fixed it for me.
It was so simple, simply simplistic when you're ready to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be ready to hear it and give yourself that compassion again to know that this isn't going to come to you as a huge flush of wisdom and you're just going to be completely over it, right? You're going to be going through challenges with your ex over and over and over again. And over time, they're going to be resolved bit by bit by bit. But the one thing that you do have control over is how you, number one, react to it or what triggers you. You can see those as habits and find ways to just kind of go, that's my default brain that is kicking in. That's not me. So I'm just going to release it. I have this saying called, it's not your fault, it's your default. Your suffering is not your fault. It is literally the default part of your brain, who isn't you. It's just the reptilian chicken brain that is still stuck in, 10,000 years ago. But this is what reactions to suffering and relationships and all that, that's the part of the brain that's kicking in. So if you stop and notice that you're suffering and the chicken brain is doing all this, then it automatically puts your front part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, in control. And now you're a human being using your mind to look at your mind. And that's very powerful.
Wow. You discuss mental well-being and inner peace. What specific practices or tools do you recommend for men that are struggling with anxiety or depression after divorce? That is a big thing for men. We're always taught not to cry, not to show emotions, but man, you gotta show those emotions.
Absolutely. And it's one of the most painful things you'll ever go through in your entire lifetime. So let yourself hurt and let yourself go through all the feels, but understand that it's temporary. This is the tenements. I can't say that I'm Buddhist per se, right? I'm a part-time monk. Okay. In other words, I think like a part-time monk. I use a lot of Buddhist principles, but I can't say that I'm Buddhist. I always say I'm Buddhish. It's kind of like being Jewish, but I'm Buddhish, right? But I utilize these concepts. One is one of the key learnings in Buddhism. It's called the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths go like this. The first truth about any life, about any human life, is that there will be suffering. Do we agree on that, David?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. The second noble truth is if there is suffering, there has to be a cause for it. There we go. Aha. Yeah. So the third truth is if there is a cause for it, then there has to be a way to reduce the suffering as well by knowing what the cause is, right? And then the fourth noble truth is in order to be able to reduce the amount of suffering you go through, it's necessary for you to live a life that's wholesome, have a way to be able to relieve the pressure in your mind through either meditation or mindfulness or just staying on top of the suffering that you're going through. Have a noble job that can, take care of your physical needs and your house over your head, those sort of things. In other words, there's actually 8 ways for you to do it. But basically the idea is think better about the type of suffering that you're going through. See it for what it is and notice that something is making you suffer and literally just go, I have to take a look at that.
So what's the difference between chasing happiness, finding contentment, or finding fulfillment? Those 3, yeah. those three.
This is really interesting. Now, this is just a theory of mine, but I have this little saying in my podcast, and they go, when you suffer less, you happy more. I know it's not proper English, but essentially the idea is that happiness is not actually something that you chase. Happiness is actually a byproduct of suffering less. So if you're able to, you get that?
Yep.
So if you're able to control your thoughts in ways, and not saying turn them off, or anything like that, notice your thoughts, be compassionate about the thoughts that you are having and the things that do trigger you, and go, this is something I have to let go of. It's not my fault. It's my default that is causing all this pain. Then what you start to find is greater contentment, because you'll be more well equipped to be able to deal with the suffering that does come your way. Now, this happens in divorce. Obviously, these are great big feelings that we're dealing with, right? And great big suffering that we're dealing with. But suffering isn't anything that causes us pain. It could be standing in line at a grocery store and there's 14 people in line, but the woman at the front has 27 coupons. That's suffering. You can notice that you're getting anxious about it and go, yeah, interesting. I'm mad because somebody's trying to save money, and this actually doesn't have anything to do with me. You can look at it that way. Or you can release it in ways like if somebody cuts you off in traffic, you can kind of go, that happened. And there's nothing I can do about it, but I'm going to let go of it. The human race is the only beings in the entire galaxy, from what we know of, a universe for what we know of, that holds grudges. A deer doesn't get approached by a hunter, shot at, missed, and then hold a grudge against it. The deer runs away because that's the default part of their brain, runs away, gets safe, and then it goes, well, that grass looks good, and I'll start eating that. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? So give yourselves a break more than anything. You're doing the best that you can, but I do recommend, as you know, I'm a big fan of therapy, and there is so much great information around positive psychology these days that allow us to be able to have a greater control over our mental wellness and your problems. I want to be very clear with you, men. This is not mental illness. This is just suffering. Right? Yep. Mental illness is something that is literally, something that you can't fix. Well, they can be dealt with, but this is not mental illness that we're trying to fix. This is ways to be able to help you have greater mental wellness.
How is the brain outdated? What the heck does that mean?
So this is fascinating. The human brain is theoretically maybe even, just depending on who you talk to, maybe 20,000 years old, right? The way that it's developed, we have various regions of our brain, but the one part of our brain that has not changed literally since 20,000 years ago is the amygdala. This is the fight or flight part of our brain that is attached just right at the base of our skull and attached to our spinal column. Right. This is literally a dinosaur brain, or a chicken brain, or a monkey brain, or whatever the case. This is very, very quick and fast to react to all sorts of things that are threats to us. Back in those days, the threats were tigers and bears and maybe warring tribes, snake, trying to take care of your loved ones against, somebody that's trying to steal your daughter, or whatever the case. There's all those sorts of things. It also took care of making sure that you're fed every day, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But that part of the brain has literally not changed over the last 20,000 years. Notice that I said it's quick to react. The more powerful and more mindful part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, that big chunk of brain that makes you human, stuck right there behind your forehead. This is the big, most powerful part, but it's slow, and it goes offline when the amygdala jumps into action, right? This practice of mindfulness or meditation, what it does is it allows you to be able to change the links between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. This is going from your back brain to your front brain, and it allows you to notice when your back brain reacts and almost trigger it immediately into your front brain and just let you just deal with it more gracefully.
So more calming effect.
Yeah. just a more graceful way of dealing with life. Like, remember what I said that the brain is actually meant to react to tigers?
Hmm.
When was the last tiger come and attack you, David?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
Right?
a while.
You know,
Hey, you'd be surprised.
bears, right?
Two two-legged
But
tiger, man, they're out there.
here's what happens with the modern mind, though. The snotty comment that you got from somebody about the post you put on the internet,
Hmm.
now the brain, that same part of the brain, views that as a threat and it treats it exactly the same. And so, with this additional weight of the modern world, or I literally call it world weight now,
Hmm.
the 24-hour news cycle, the algorithm, the angertainment constantly. These are all extra layers of suffering that are on top of all the other types of human suffering that we're going through. And this is all very, very heavy. And this is probably the most traumatic time that the human being has ever dealt with in the history of mankind. Just the amount, the constant barrage of threats, perceived threats. The better we get at seeing those, the better we are at being able to disassociate it from a threat and actually just see it with a much more logical and compassionate, I keep on saying graceful, but easy way going through life.
What are some of the unexpected benefits of divorce? Men are able to reinvent, retool. What are some of the things that they can look forward to after going through
Mm.
a divorce?
Everyone is different, obviously, but I can
Yeah.
say in my case, I got a beautiful sense of control back in my life, and that control wasn't anything that was nefarious or anything about that, but it felt like now I had me, myself, and I to be able to
Okay.
deal with, you know, and that spoon that I left on the counter, it's still going to be there in the morning, but at least I know I left it there.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really enjoy. I've decided I'm 59 years old. I've only recently decided that I prefer being single.
Mhm.
I had a nice dating time with a lovely woman who was so smart and so kind, and just so wise in the way that she dealt with everything. But I realized that just being in her orbit was something that it was really not something that allowed me to feel content. So I dropped the shoe and explained that to her, and she did it. She dealt with it just so gracefully too, which I'm really thankful for as well. I can say that, live each day and take it as it comes, just enjoy it as much as you can, because things are going to change,
Yeah.
and somebody else might come along and sweep you off your feet, and then again that might not happen either. But either way, change is good.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And lastly, you ready for this one? You ready? In your next book, Lessons of a Part-Time Monk, what are some of the chapters?
So this is going to be a real, I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to say that a game changer, because it's up to everybody to decide on their own. But essentially, what I really want to say is that life can be so difficult, but we can choose ways to make it easier on ourselves. And so much of the stuff that is happening in our mind, I go through explaining what all the different types of suffering that we go through. Essentially, there's three types of suffering
Mhm.
that are the main themes, I guess, of suffering, and they are greed, hatred, and delusion. Okay, so those are the three big main themes in the Buddhist canon. Greed comes from not just from wanting and keeping a bunch of money, but also from lusting after things like likes, or lusting after things like material goods or higher, more recognition, this clinging, that sort of thing. Hatred covers all sorts of different things. It covers anger, but it also covers lashing out. And it also includes maybe holding a grudge or something along those lines. Those
Mhm.
two big ones, greed and anger or hatred. But the one that fascinates me the most, and this is the one that I'm probably spend the most time on, is the idea of delusions. And delusions are things that are perceived reality to one person and one person alone. right? We see so many delusions. We have so many convictions about the way that we live our lives and the way that is right. And this is my way or the highway. They may be religious views. They may be political views. This is a big one.
Big one,
There may
huge.
be views on whether or not it was better to have garbage picked up on Tuesday in the back alley, and now it's happening on Wednesday. These are delusions that we absolutely have control over. And what we are doing is we're suffering more from them because of our inability to, number one, go out there and to seek the real answers, to go out there and to seek truth, gather
Now,
evidence.
does not having respect for others' views, is that part of it too?
Well, not having respect for other people's views is a type of hatred.
Okay. All right.
Right? It is a type, it's something that's really interesting for me is that it works for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but whenever I'm faced with, troublesome opinions or whatever the case, I always think to myself, over opinions, peace over opinions. And whatever their opinion is, I also remind myself that all opinions exist. Does that make sense? Just by saying that all opinions exist, and that doesn't mean that I have to agree with them. I can just notice that they exist. And just by saying that, this allows me the opportunity to literally let go of any suffering that I'm feeling during that time by kind of going, hey, you know what? I don't have to be right, but I do feel the need to be peaceful.
I go from the standpoint that everybody has an opinion and everybody has a butt. And I'm talking about the little hole in the middle of the butt, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so everybody has a butt. So everybody has an opinion. Well, Tim, this has been awesome. Man, I got to get your book. I'm going to get your book. Yeah, but
Still in
I'm
the
looking forward.
process.
Hey, I'm looking forward to the part-time monk though.
Thank you. Thank you. If people want to listen to my podcast, it's called Sufferless with a Part-Time Monk. Suffer less is one word because when you suffer less, you happy more.
Yep. And we will have those links in the show notes, but I appreciate your time hanging out with me on a Thursday night. But thanks for your interesting views. Yeah, you got me thinking about a couple things, which I don't like sometimes, if that's okay. But thanks
Yeah.
again. But hold on to the line. Don't go anywhere.